holla with accompaniments. And today's accompaniment is a Southern classic, what we call greens, because it could be collards, could be mustards, could be turnip, whatever greens you got, we're putting it in a pot and cooking it today.
This greens recipe actually starts off with homemade chicken broth. I have some aromatics and seasonings in here, and then we will actually cook the greens inside the broth. You'll see later. We're going to start this off by first discussing the type of greens. Like I said previously, down here where I'm from in Texas, we always just called it greens because it was usually a combination of any of the dark leafy greens that we could get or had on hand. I have sometimes done all turnips or all collards, but rare because it's what I'm used to, the different flavors and textures that each one of them bring. And so I have a few different varieties today. I wanted to talk about each one that I have. Now this is your standard collard. These are kind of actually on the smaller sides. The collards have these dark, really deep texture leaves. These usually take the longest to cook. They're chewy and definitely the sturdiness you want. They can hold up to hours of cooking, which is why these definitely almost always go in. Now here's my new school spin. This is actually curly kale or sometimes blue Scotch kale. I have been using this kind in my greens for about 15 years now. My first Thanksgiving, didn't listen to mom's advice, waited last minute to go do my Thanksgiving shopping, and they were out of most of the greens. This is all they had left, so I went with it. Put it in there, and it's been delicious addition to the greens, and so now I add it every year. The next one I have here is a turnip green. These are kind of brighter in color. They're more tender leaf. These cook down before the other two specifically, but these are delicious. They're more of a mild flavor, not as bitter as the other greens, and so I love to put them in. I also really like to put in mustard greens. However, could not find any. I'm growing some in the garden, but they are not ready to harvest yet. I will say a tip for the mustard greens. If you use them, do not use as many of those particular greens, as many bunches of those as you do the others, because they do have a bitter mustard-like flavor, and using too many of them will change the entire taste of your dish. Trust me, I've done it before. Take my word for it. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how I pick each one, actually. And so you've heard the term picking greens. Now what you can do is you can fold the collards in half, peel off this big stem in the middle, and then you can roll this up. You can do it by a bunch of leaves, like maybe 5, 6 leaves, and then just run a knife through here and chop it up. These I just put them in a pile and toss them to my chickens. They love them. What we do though, what I've always done growing up since I was a little girl, and what I have my girls do as well, it's just a personal preference, but we will do the same process. Pull that big stem off, and then we'll go here, break the leaf apart, and then just kind of tear it into bite-sized pieces. The size here is just, it really is up to preference. I know some people in my family that will leave these leaves whole, and I know some who will have really thin shreds. I do mine's about this size, and that's just what we like to do. Now on the kale, very similar process. This stem is very thick and does not taste good, even when it's cooked down, in my opinion. This is one reason why I actually prefer to pick the greens myself. I rarely, if at any time, buy greens at the store that have been pre-washed and cut, because most of them will come with majority of the bag, these hard stems, and they just don't taste good. So, I mean, hey, I'm all for conveniences and shortcuts, but when it comes to my greens, I want greens and not stems. So kale, I just pull it apart off the stem, pull it into bite-sized pieces. Again, you could actually just cut this off the stem and into turnips. The stem in the middle of the leaf is not as woodsy and hard as the one on the other ones, the other greens. So I tend to leave it. I remove it when it gets thick here at the bottom. So put it in half, take the big stem away, and then kind of just break it apart, pinch it apart into the size pieces that you like. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this with all the greens I have. This is just a portion of them. I actually have 5 pounds of greens. These are going to cook down tremendously. So 5 pounds sounds like a lot. Trust me, especially if you're making it for a holiday, just go with it. You totally could cut this down though to 2.5 pounds if you're just doing it for a small family or for a Sunday dinner. This 5 pounds is gonna go for about 12 people. Well, my family and maybe a few leftovers. I have 8 members of my family. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all of these trimmed, and then I will meet you to my sink so we can go ahead and get these cleaned up. And now we're at the sink getting ready to clean these off. Now, you young ones, and I say this as if I'm not a millennial myself, but I don't identify as such. But I'm just joking. But this is the reason why your granny won't let you do the greens, because you trying to take a shortcut, and some things we just don't mess with, okay? These have to be properly cleaned. A lot of times when you get them in bunches, they do a lot better nowadays at the store, but when you get them in bunches, they're tight. Even the way they grow outside, a lot of times there are bugs in it, even the ones you can't necessarily see. So this is how my family does it. This is how I continue to do it. I fill up, make sure you can hear me. I fill up my sink first. It's cleaned and disinfected, and then I fill up my sink with the greens and water. And then what I do, let me get this filled up first. Okay, I have my sink filled. What's happening right now is the dirt that's in between the leaves is going to fall to the bottom of the sink. What I like to do at this point, again, what I saw my family do, what I continue to do, is go ahead and put some salt in. Now I have kosher salt here. I'm just gonna sprinkle a good amount on top. The salt actually helps to choke out and kill any bugs or organisms that are still living in this, to make sure we're not getting a bunch of that in our greens. So trust me, growing up in the South, that's like the worst thing is to eat some greens with bugs in it. I know, gross, it's disgusting, but it has happened before. So what I do right now is I'll give a little zhuzh. I was making up words. Just press it down a little bit and let that soak. Probably add some more. And then I am going to let this soak for about 10 minutes. So I'll see you again in 10 minutes. This has been soaking for about 10 minutes. At this point, come in with a little swish. Now what I'm gonna do is just with my hand, I'm going to leave the water in here because, like I said, that dirt from this greens that we kind of moved around here is going to be dropping to the bottom, dirt and debris. And so what I like to do is just grab them by the handfuls, shake a little bit off, and then put in a bowl on the other side of my sink. Now what I'm going to do is just, you see how murky the water is? What I'm going to do is go ahead, drain this water. I'm going to get my greens back over here into a clean sink, put more fresh water and salt, and repeat the whole process again. While the greens are doing the final soak, I'm gonna go ahead and get prepared for everything we're gonna get in our pot to get the cooking done. Now here I have about 12 ounces
of salt pork. Sometimes my grandmother used to call it dry salt bacon or salt jowl. Sometimes you'll see this in your fresh meat pork section of your grocery store. Now with this, like I said, it's 12 ounces. I'm only going to use about half of this, and then I'll freeze the other half. This is part of seasoning. It is hard to get flavor in these greens, and so we really have to do some steps in order to develop the flavors. One thing I like to do is go ahead and fry up this dry salt pork or salt jowl, salt pork. It kind of reminds you of bacon, but without the smokiness, I guess I could say. So here I'm just going to do a dice, and then I'm gonna fry this up a little bit in the same pot that I will be cooking the greens in. So this is totally optional. I do like the flavor in it. Now, I don't always cook my greens this way. This is usually my method when I'm cooking greens for the holidays and special occasions. When I do it for a Sunday dinner, a lot of times I won't have the salt pork, and then I'll just do it without. But if I do have it in my freezer, like I said, this half will go toward another batch of greens, then I'll use it. Now, this is definitely not your most healthy way of making greens, but it's okay for just a special occasion, which is when we'll have it, like Thanksgiving. Now, if you want to make this a little bit healthier, you can omit this portion of it, and I'll give you another tip when we get to the seasoning meat that's going inside of the greens. But I'm gonna keep dicing this and get this frying up in the pan. Here is my large stock pot. I'm gonna go ahead and get that salt bacon that we had, or salt, oh my gosh, I've called it a million things, salt pork, and give this a chance to get going. Now I'm just gonna turn my fire here on, do about medium high so we can get going here. And then once this cooks down some, I'm gonna go ahead and add in some onion. This has cooked down for about 5 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and add my onion. And all the measurements are going to be listed below. I'm not gonna do you like granny and just say a little bit of this and a little bit of that, even though that's how I learned. I got you though. Go ahead and add my onion in. I'm gonna give this a nice, just a small little stir before we add in our liquid. I poured a little bit of the chicken broth here. I'm just gonna keep pouring. I'll let you know what this equals up to. Now, I'm telling you, I have done this recipe more times than I can count. And I've tried it with water. I have tried it with store-bought chicken broth and stock and all the things. And it just does not taste the same. There's just a level of flavor that is there when you add the chicken broth. So I'm gonna keep adding this, and then we'll add the star of the show, which is the greens. Now it's time to get the greens in. Now, if you are following along with me and are doing the 5 pounds of greens, which of course is less once you remove all of those stems, this may or may not fit in your pot. What I like to do is kind of push it down into the liquid that's hot, and that'll help it start to wilt and cook. And then of course, like I said, this cooks all the way down, so you can let it cook for a few minutes and then add more on top. So this is about all I can add in, which leaves me about 1/3 of the greens left. I'm gonna go ahead and add a lid on, and then I have a special treat. I'm gonna go ahead and add in this too. One thing I forgot before I move on to my next, or my special ingredient here, I have a couple more special. Really, I'm just dramatic. Everything's special. But here's another secret family recipe, along with always cooking my
greens and chickens and homemade chicken stock. Now, like I said, my family does variations of greens, but we almost always use chicken stock to flavor this. And like I said, it just does not taste the same without it. This is another family secret. Jalapeno pepper. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the jalapeno in here. And then I'm gonna add another one as this cooks. It's just a heat that comes from it. It's another background layer flavor that is just, you can't get anywhere else. Now, all of my family members who are extended family members who are looking at this recipe, now they know. They ask me, what is that? What do you put in your greens? Everybody knows the secret now. Another thing I'm gonna go ahead and get in here now is my meat. Now, what my family members will often do is to go ahead and boil their seasoning meat with the chicken stock that they've done. I'm not doing that, A, to save time, but also B, I've learned that if it cooks with the greens, because the greens have to cook so long, kind of saves me some time, and it still cooks all the way through with the same level of flavor, in my opinion. But full disclosure, that's what they normally do. They'll soak it. Now here today, I have about a pound of neck bones for my seasoning meat. Here you can add whatever meat you want. I tend to like pork, like I said, for the holidays specifically, but you could definitely use a smoked turkey wing or leg, or even smoked turkey necks here. Ham hock, I love ham hock here. Just so happen to have the smoked pork necks here, so that's what I got here. I'm just gonna kind of again push this down. I'm gonna let this cook for a little bit. Now you can't see the liquid, but I know it's there, and again, years of doing this, I know this is gonna cook all the way down. So I am just gonna check this. I'm gonna put the lid on, let it cook for a little bit before I decide whether or not to add some water. I'm gonna give this a good stir here. And now is where I'm gonna go ahead and add my turnips and seasoning. Turnips in. Now for the seasoning, you may want to taste it at this point. I had the seasoned chicken stock, so I already know there's a good amount of salt and seasoning in here. At this point, I'm just going to add a little bit of Creole seasoning, which when I say seasoning salt, that's pretty much what I mean. Creole or Cajun seasoning. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of this in, and then now is where, I don't have to babysit it anymore. It's just gonna cook for a while until it gets nice and soft. I'm gonna go ahead and add the lid back on and let this cook until it's done. These have been cooking a couple of hours and they are soft and tender. The meat is falling off the bone. Now this part is up to your preference, so you could let it go as long as you want, or it can be as chewy as you want. So be sure to taste it. Be also sure to go ahead and fish out that jalapeno so nobody bites into it. But that is it. Now this day I ended up serving it with some hot water cornbread, and it cured all that ails you. I hope you enjoy this recipe.